All right. So, a big welcome to How Do Men, a podcast with the ambition of building conversation, co learning, and co creation in order to find solutions, tools, and concrete tips for the modern man. Today, I'm here with none other than Alexander Bard. So, for those of you who do not know of him, Alexander is a philosopher constantly navigating the borderland between human and machine. He's the author of 6 books, co-written with Jan Söderqvist, and he's just returned from a book-speaking tour in North America. Currently, and something we're going to be diving much deeper into during this podcast, is that he's also highly engaged as a leader within the Swedish and European men's movements. Alexander, a warm welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I felt immediately I've been longing for this meeting and conversation. The moment you come in, the energy that comes through you, and the level of engagement and the different topics you're involved with. And I am keen to deep dive into some of them almost right away. But before we get started, we begin with the question that begins all of the episodes here, which is, what does being a man mean to you, Alexander?
Well, then I'm a philosopher, so I'll start with a negation. It's being non-woman. There are 2 sexes. There's man and woman. I'm also a psychoanalyst, and I'm working with transition cases. So what has happened over the last 100 years is that we developed certain technologies where we have enabled people to actually develop 2 further sexes, which I call trans man and trans woman. But we have men and women, and we, 99.9% of us are clearly born into men or women. And I found that spectrum interesting to work with, just to start there. But there are no human beings. There are only men and women. You're either man or you're a woman. And if we start from there, what's interesting is to try to find out the archetypes and to see the map. For me as a man, that means finding out what I would contribute as a man, what I do as a man. And my contribution starts with my own sex, starts from being a man. Just like women today try to figure out how they best contribute to society and to what they find meaningful as women. So it's a negation to start with, very philosophical. Besides the obvious anatomical fact, we have different hormones, testosterone and estrogen have different effects on the human body, and we have different genital organs, thankfully. And perversely enough, we enjoy each other's genital organs and are very attracted to them, pretty obsessed with them, to be honest. So men and women do need each other, and my work always starts with the assumption of equality is a good starting point, and men and women equally contribute to society, and I just try to figure out what their optimal contributions are.
Amazing. So I'm hearing you say it's definitely, we're starting out with a negation. It's a non-woman.
Yes.
There are only 2, there's not human beings, there are only man and woman. And I hear you also talk about certain archetypes and different archetypes that a man lives out or lives through a man. Would you like to explore a bit?
Sure. The point is that if we recognize that there are no human beings, there is no archetype for the human being. The archetypes, the fundamental archetypes, are men and women. Because they are men or women. I mean, we have to go to what we are, not what we project. So when men and women are together, out of convenience, we say a bunch of human beings got together. And we very often try to find common ground, and then we call that humanity, or we say what it means to be human, etc. But when you really look down into your own subjectivity, who you are, and then look into what your contribution is socially, which I call tribal, and individual and tribal are actually the words I use. I don't think we are ever individuals because we're always connected to other things around us, and there's no solid ego to begin with. There's so many things at the same time. I mean, we're basically schizophrenic, to be honest about it. So the way I look at it is that you're either individual, which is you, and then we can be a society together or a tribe, and that's we. And the question then is, how do we contribute? And the benefit that women have is that they're born with a contribution. Is called reproduction.
Yeah.
They give birth to children. So fundamentally, half the job is already figured out. It lies on the female body. It's the woman who gives birth to children. And this is why men are cursed in the sense that we have to invent what our contribution is. So if you start looking at men, then you realize suddenly that there's so many different archetypes among men, and you have to kind of organize the different archetypes to find out who you are. Whereas women can just go into one archetype, which is the mother, or contributing towards the mother. Even women who do not give birth to children support the women who give birth to children. And once women have stopped giving birth to children, they become matriarchs, they become older women, they're still supporting reproduction. Because reproduction is half the game. The world being reborn all the time, like our last book is called Process and Event, and the process obviously refers to women. The process is that everything is constantly reborn. There's a new season. There's a new year. There are new children being born. They grow old and they die, but before they die, they give birth to new children, etc. So this reproduction cycle is fundamentally female. So we could say that humanity starts with women, because it has to start with reproduction.
Of course, that's where we come from.
That's the curse of evolution. Men then are added on top of that. We put a little sperm inside the egg, and apparently we've contributed. But the question is, what do we do as for the rest of the contribution? And then if you look at archetypology, which is the timeless aspect of what it means to be human, the other aspect is paradigmatics, which was the time-specific point of being human. Why I'm doing a lot of philosophical work, for example, on the internet age, on technology, on the relationship between man and machine, is because I'm trying to find out what is specific for the times we live in. But if you look at the archetypes, they're timeless. They've been developed throughout evolution over millions of years. We share them with other flock animals. We can observe other flock animals like dolphins or gorillas or whatever you like, and find that the archetypes are replicated there as well. So what are the fundamental archetypes for us as men? Well, we're non-woman in the sense we do not reproduce. That means we're responsible for just about everything else. So fundamentally, if you ask women, they like men to protect them and provide for them.
Yeah.
And the fundamental aspect of protection and provision is therefore on the masculine side. And the protection and the provision have two roles. They're called the warrior and the hunter. And if you go to any nomadic tribe, anywhere in history, you find warriors and hunters. Usually the hunters are more hunters than warriors, because hunters have to work every day, whereas the warriors actually prepare and load up and build shit and stuff until war comes along. But thankfully enough, we don't go to war all the time.
No.
We have to hunt all the time, though. So the warriors and the hunters are there. And very often, at least before we started looking at this, John and I, archetypology started with warrior and hunter. And we always thought this kind of weird, because the masculine brain it's very split. The brain is actually two brain halves that are conflict with each other all the time. They're called logos and pathos. But the logos and pathos split doesn't really make sense, because it's not reflected in the warrior and the hunter, because both the warrior and the hunter need both the logos and the pathos. So what is the original, the first primary archetypal division in men? And it turns out it's when we look for leadership. And when you look for leadership, there are two guys you're looking for, not one. You look for the smartest guy and you look for the strongest guy. And the strongest guy is usually younger, because your muscles are developed earlier.
Yeah.
So a leader among the warriors and the hunters who's younger is usually the strongest hunter or the strongest warrior. We call them warrior chief and we call them hunter chief. The oldest guy of the tribe is usually the smartest, because wisdom comes with age and lived experience, and therefore we look to somebody we call the priest character. Therefore, there's a warrior priest who's much older than the warrior chief, and there's a hunter priest who's much older than the hunter chief. Now, this is the first division we men look for. If you think of, if you live like in a nomadic tribe and you get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, you were called in by the leaders and the elders. And you would definitely look up to the priest for wisdom. And you would look up to the chief for strength. And you would admire the chief for being as strong as he is. He's stronger than you are, because you're going to follow him into battle and into hunt. And into hunting. And then the thing with the priest is that priest takes care of wisdom. He takes care of the intelligence. So fundamentally, if women stand for a will to reproduction, we men stand for will to intelligence, which is to be control of the past and control of history and control of facts. That's the priest. And a will to transcendence, which is freedom into the future, where we men can pursue and expand the tribe, and then we follow a chief, later a king in history. And that's the other leader. And the great thing about splitting these two which was done first in Persian, later in Chinese and Indian philosophy 4,000 years ago, was that you get rid of the major problem for men historically, and that's the tyrant. Whenever we're led with only one guy, it's a guy who is overambitious and he wants to be both the strongest and the smartest guy at the same time, and it always goes to hell. So we want to avoid the tyrant. What's important for men is to avoid the tyrant and avoid tyranny. And we avoid it by splitting the priest and the chief into two different roles. And then it follows all the way through. We have the priestly and the chiefly aspect inside our brains. The logos half of your brain, priest. Yeah. The pathos half of your brain is the chief. And then we can look into warrior and hunting, which is when women start looking at us and get attracted to us, because warrior protects, hunter provides. And that's why women say they like a husband or boyfriend to protect and provide for them, so they feel safe and comfortable to reproduce. Here you got three wills. One is on the female side, will to reproduction. Two are on the male side, and that's the will to intelligence and the will to transcendence. And that's how archetypology is structured.
Wow. Okay. I love that explanation. I'm also curious as to why, why this is not talked about more. Like why? Because I hear lots of talks about the Jungian archetypes. The simplified version, or the king, warrior, magician, lover, or the male version.
Which is just fantasy fairy tale versions of archetypes. They're not real. Jung was inspiring, but very unfinished. So I start with Hegel. I think the major philosophical revolution in Western culture happened in Germany in the early 1800s, and it was Hegel. After Hegel comes Nietzsche, Darwin, Freud, Jung, etc. All amazing thinkers. But many of them are very unfinished. What we're working with today, sitting between these giants, especially Hegel and Nietzsche, is that we're studying them all. So when we are doing archetypology today, we're just looking at Jung and we say, okay, that's good imagination, nice fantasy story, doesn't really apply to how men actually function. So what we're doing today, for example, using data and doing anthropology based on data, is that we're proving Jung wrong. And we say, thanks for inventing archetypology, but actually, this is how it actually works. Yeah. And then we can prove, both through philosophical reasoning and through data and science, we can prove that these theories actually make sense. So the reason you haven't heard about it is because nobody's done the work.
No.
And a lot of men's work is therefore built on fairy tales. And what I want to do as a philosopher, go into men's work, is that, listen, this is how it actually works. This is how men operate. This is what it means to be a man in a scientific, rational way, rather than have these sort of stories being told to us about being these heroes or whatever, who are on journeys and you know, And, you know, it's like I said, men's work starts with, you're not going to invent anything about yourself at all. Because if I ask you what you are, you're probably narcissistic enough to just tell me you're wishful thinking.
Most likely, yeah.
Won't work. Oh. You have to sit in a men's group for 2 years with at least 6 other men. You're the 7th. They will tell you after 2 years what your archetypes are.
Yeah.
Only they will tell you, and you will understand that they mean it.
Yeah.
It's not about wishful thinking. It's also not about a lack of self-confidence. It's about a balanced self-confidence when you realize who you are and what you can contribute to the tribe and how that gives you meaning and purpose.
Okay, so this, I love this, the beautiful simplicity of it. And I'm also curious to, okay, so I as a man only really have 2 archetypes inside of me. Is that what we're talking about? Or does this expand further into, or are these 2 the only ones I'm actually working with? And also then how does, because in men's work, as you know, and also something that we talk about a lot in the Sculpt training, is purpose. You know, having a sense of purpose, finding my purpose, my contribution, my specific contribution. Would you say that that is also a fairy tale?
No, I'd say you're talking too much about the form and not about the content. You're saying you need to find a purpose. Well, that's obvious. You haven't given the purpose to the person by asking the question. That person's journey towards that purpose starts right there. That's correct. But you've only given them the form. Giving people the form is not giving them the content. I would address it this way. It's very smart. I've discovered this through work, through men's work. The last 10 years I've been very involved, and I've discovered if you think you got more than three archetypes or more, then you're probably psychotic. Stay with most 2.
Yeah.
Here's the great thing that seems to work with every man I met. Find your primary archetype. Your primary archetype is that which you do with ease. It doesn't take much effort. You're almost born with the talent to do it, but other guys are impressed and applaud you when you do it.
Okay.
That's your primary archetype, okay? The secondary archetype is that which you can do with effort. You probably have to get educated towards it. For most men, this is their profession, is what they work with. So the secondary archetype, it's more like somebody's asking, do we have this archetype in the room, somebody to fulfill this mission?
Yeah.
And you're looking around and nobody's saying yes, meaning nobody has a primary archetype here. And then you say, okay, I could do it. If somebody has to do it, I could be the one who does it. That's your secondary archetype.
Got it.
So you got to find both.
Yeah.
And I say usually pursue your second and then go for the first one. Okay. But realize that your primary archetype is that which you don't think means anything to anybody. It's just the easiest thing in the world. But for other guys, it's really impressive. Other brothers will applaud you when you do it. And of course, when I say this, it's easy because I'm a public person. Most guys have a kind of relationship with my career. And then they go, oh, your secondary archetype was the musician and your primary archetype was always the philosopher. Yes. Got it. Right there.
Yeah.
So if you can apply that to me and it makes sense and you get pretty much Alexander Bard covered when you say that, then the guys can start thinking about what could possibly be their primary and their secondary archetype. So you get two chances in life. You got a primary and a secondary archetype. If you go to college in America, it's called major and minor. The two major things you study. One is the major you really focus on, and the minor is what you can add to that. So this has helped. This is just out of practical experience. Almost every man I've met in men's work the last 10 years, I found it very useful to go towards these two archetypes for themselves. And that's exactly when you sit down in a men's group, which is fundamental to men's work. These are not your best friends. They will not flatter you. These are just men who happen to be different ages. They live, in the neighborhood that you live in. But basically, they will tell you the truth. They will call you out. And what they then do over the next 2 years or so in the process, they will move you towards your archetypes. Yeah. And once you've found them, you must pursue them uncompromisingly.
This is amazing. This is brilliant. I feel I have a lot of questions that I want to deep dive into here. And also listening into some of the responses from the listeners that have asked for some proper explanation from some of these terms, because it's easy to talk about archetypes. I know that many listeners might not even understand what that is.
Well, archetype means the original type, like the most basic type, exactly. The most basic form for us to develop as man. Man and woman are archetypes. So they're the most basic on which you build all other identities. That's what archetype means. Yeah.
Beautiful. So again, then, when you say, I want to find my, finding my musician archetype and then my philosopher archetype. Is there, for anyone who wants to understand and pursue this, is there like a massive library of archetypes to look into, or come up with it myself?
No, we have invented this.
Yeah.
You only got you had archetypology before Jung, and actually we're formally going back to archetypology before Jung came into the picture. But anthropology is what you should study if you're interested in archetypology, because archetypology is part of anthropology. So anthropology studies how human beings operate in large social gatherings and what kind of forms they develop, what kind of ideas they develop. Sociology deals with the formality of social interaction, but anthropology is basically the study of human culture. And within human cultures, the archetypes constantly return. Then on top of that, you got the paradigm. And here's the thing, you are a man of your time. You are a man of the 21st century. That means the archetypes are screwed in a certain direction.
Could they be like an entrepreneur, for instance? Is that an archetype?
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect example. Yeah. So I would say the entrepreneur, the businessman is the hunter today. And the engineer, 99% of the world's engineers are men, and construction workers. Engineers are obviously the warrior. So the warrior and the hunter returns paradigmatically, and you just described it. The entrepreneur, the businessman on one side, and the engineer on the other. And if you think about it, Sweden, we're sitting in Sweden right now. Any modern economy like Sweden is completely built on these male archetypes. The entire economy, the Swedish export industry, is built on entrepreneurs, businessmen, and engineers. It's still men. It's still all about the men. I mean, they provide, and hopefully we got in the military to protect us from the Russians or whatever, and then they also protect. But the protection provision is constantly on the male side. We can imagine anything else, but it stays on the male side in any culture. It holds up society as much as women hold up society by reproducing. It's equal with women's capacity to reproduce, to protect and provide. and here are the male archetypes. And that's a perfect example of going paradigmatic. I can give you another example of that. A lot of men come to me and they're like 29 years old and they want to be seen and heard or whatever, and they want to have some advice. And I said, listen, if you're 29 years old and you're a man, your most important decision in your life in the society we live in today is going to be, you're going to be a father or not. Yeah. If you don't think about it, you're probably going to make the wrong girl pregnant and have a baby you never wanted, and it's going to curse you the rest of your life. Okay? If you plan for it and decide you're going to raise a family and you're going to have a wife and you're going to have kids, which the majority of men should and will do, then have the plan. Arrange the plan. Go back to your men's group and say, I think I'm going to be a father. I want to find the right wife. I understand it's not about romantic love and all that, because then we'll just fall apart in a few weeks. Rather, I want to find a woman who's solid enough and determined enough to understand how hard it is to actually make a family work. And I want to build it as a fucking company with her and co-run it with her, and we'll have babies together and we raise a family. Because then you have a great chance of actually this making it work. Because you see, you look at it archetypologically. Who is a father? Well, he has a vision. He's in control. He dates women. He doesn't go to Tinder. He doesn't sit in pornography all day long. No. He goes on dates with women and he declares, this is my vision. This is my career. These are my archetypes. And by the way, being a father is an archetype I totally buy into. I'm on fire about becoming a father. And I want a woman who really takes her responsibility and goes into that equally with me, right? I tell you what, as long as you go on a date with a woman and you have a vision of where you want to go, she will find you incredibly attractive, compared to the rest of the trash out there, men who are just looking for recognition from women.
Yeah.
No, you got your recognition from the other men. You sit in your men's group. You've sworn to them that you want to be a father. They say, off you go, brother. Bless you. Go out there. Start dating women. Go serious about it. Take marriage seriously. Take being a father seriously. Be in control of the whole thing. And women will love you for it, because they can then concentrate on becoming mothers. And most guys don't get this. They don't get that when you're 29, you need to make this decision. And they said, well, I want to wait a few more years. Okay. So you're going to be 45 and your wife's going to be 23 when you marry. Listen, very few men can handle that. And very few women are attracted by that proposition.
No.
If there's an age difference of, say, 3 to 5 years, that's usually a plus. You should be a little older because it's taken longer for you to grow up. Okay? But if you're, say, 3 to 5 years older than she, it's probably a perfect match.
Yeah.
Now, find a woman who's as serious about this as you are, who goes towards female archetypology, who has sisters, who has a strong female network, maybe a couple of gay friends as well. That's good for women, right? They're supportive. So she has a strong social network around her. She doesn't need you for a social network.
No.
She's strong with women. Like, every time I hear a guy tell me that I met this girl and she tells me that she doesn't like to hang out with the girls, she wants to hang out with the guys.
Yeah.
And I just tell them, what a deranged view of your own sex. I tell her to fuck off right away and say, go and get some fucking sisters out there. I don't want to hang out with a woman who doesn't have a strong female social network. Why would I? It's degrading towards her. And she should say the same to you. No, I don't want to hang out with a guy who looks for recognition in women, because you're supposed to deliver to me, not get my recognition. Getting recognition from a woman is your mother applauding you when you're 11 for doing something remarkable. Then you're 11 years old. Now, if you're old enough to fuck women and you're a grown-up, you're going to deliver to her. You're going to deliver the protection and provision to her. You and your brothers will deliver protection and provision to the woman you're going to marry. That's what it's about. And if you can bring that to a date, you're in a whole new game with women.
I love that. And I'm noticing like completely seeing that shift in my own relationship and how we're doing, and especially the
tell us about your relationship, because I'm a monk myself, so I decided not to marry, so that's the difference.
Well, one thing I'm interested in exploring also together with you is I'm having my first child being born in July.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And
I hope it goes well.
I hope so too. And it's a daughter, and so all of a sudden, I feel I want a sense of I've won a lottery in a way, because having a daughter versus having a son, obviously both would have been amazing journeys. But I feel I've been enriched, and that might be just biologically because I know it's a woman, but I feel I've been enriched by having something which holds a bit of mystery to me, because there are aspects of this that I will never be myself. I'm super keen to I've been talking about to my woman about this, and what is how if any, how much will a father get involved in the what does a father do when raising a daughter?
Negation.
Yeah,
You're not her.
yeah.
You're primarily not her.
I'm just and that's what I'm sort of
Isn't that
leaning towards
beautiful?
as well. It's like I'm just I'm just doing what I'm doing. I'm just leaning into who I am and continuing with that, and that's sort of what I'm leaning more and more towards. But I'd love to just hear you explore that as well.
Well, a girl will look up to the mother as herself.
Yeah,
She's the new version of the mother, right?
yeah,
And therefore the father stands for the opposite of that. That's the negation. He's not mother. Fundamentally, he's not mother more than anything. So she can basically project anything onto you that she doesn't project onto the mother.
Mm.
What you will discover is that in her process as a daughter to get away from the mother and become independent, she will use you as the main figure for the grown-ups. What the father symbolizes for the daughter is the adult world. So because the mother can't, because obviously, the way it works biologically is that birth being an incredibly weird thing. Yeah. We celebrate our children being born, although actually their birth is the most horrible thing they'll ever explore in their entire life, but they can't remember it. Thankfully, we can't remember about it. So at least, your daughter's going to be tortured when she's born. Yeah. Absolutely, totally tortured. But thankfully, she will not remember it. So it's a bit like surgery. Like, somebody's torturing you when you're in surgery, but because you're totally blown out by narcosis, then actually you cannot understand what's going on. It's a bit like that. But the great trauma in life is actually birth itself. So, but birth, I would say, is for the mother to understand that when the umbilical cord it's always cut off by an older woman. It's usually a matriarch. The matriarch cuts off the umbilical cord, teaching the mother, you and child, in this case, the daughter, you and daughter are not the same thing any longer for you. So from birth, mother and daughter are separated. But the daughter doesn't get that because children don't.
No.
Because as soon as the child starts sucking the mother's tit, the mamilla, that's what it's called in psychoanalysis, as soon as they start sucking the mamilla, they think they're unified again and they're back inside the womb. And that goes on for a few more months.
Yeah.
With kangaroos, it's obvious, but actually it's the same thing that happens. Yeah. We just don't have the, we just don't have that little, box on the stomach on human beings, because actually we just take them to the tit right away. But it's the same thing. So what happens is that during the first year, the child gradually starts discovering that the child and the mother are different entities. And here is where the phallus comes into the picture in psychoanalysis. At about 1 year of age, the child realizes that there's something else than mother. Number one, the separation of child and mother is the first separation. The second separation is then the separation between the child and this mysterious thing walking around in the room, which is not mother, the father.
Yeah.
This is matrix, mamilla, and the phallus. Please note here that I talked about the brains before. That men have 2 brains and women have 1 brain. It's the exact opposite when it comes to genital organs. There are 2 genital organs we orientate ourselves towards on the female body, the mamilla and the matrix, but only 1 on the male body, which is the phallus. Nature is perfectly balancing things. It's just great. So we only have the phallus to contribute. So what does the phallus represent? The phallus represents the negation of the matrix and of the mamilla. Matrix, a closed door for the child. They realize it will never get back into the womb. And by the time the child has enough teeth in its mouth that sucking the tit isn't that comfortable any longer, so the child starts eating little meatballs or whatever you eat in Sweden when you're a child.
Yeah.
The child is separating from the mother completely. It's also separating from the mamilla. And therefore, the phallus then represents the grown-up life. You see how this simply comes out of negation? You've only got 1/3 genital organ left. Yeah. So that genital organ will represent adult life. And of course, because father is fucking mother, and it was father who fucked mother who made me, it was that process of love between the father and mother that made me, so I'm sitting here as a child, then the phallus represents the adult aspect of mother that I'm not part of. And this is where the phallus comes into the picture. This is why men often operate as negations towards women. Women are fundamentally human, and then in addition to women, men come in and do the rest of the work. That's how we operate.
Oh, yeah. It's
You're
liberating.
getting a crash course in psychoanalysis today.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I love it also that you brought up the birth trauma there. I remember one of my psychedelic experiences I had to live through my own like birth trauma where I nearly died, couldn't breathe, was put in one of these QS experiences and could see the whole trauma trajectory or line following this trauma throughout my life. And I spoke with the shaman or the facilitator, and he said, you know, if people only knew how much their he said birth traumas and previous life traumas, like the previous life death traumas, because you're so you have so much medicine, and the actual process of dying is very, you know, you're drugged down, especially Western medicine.
I wouldn't even say it's you, but we might disagree on this because I think the tribe reincarnates, but we don't reincarnate. I think we're born like we're born with our genetic makeup, and we're born with our genes, and we have a body when we're born and all that. And with that comes a lot of memory. The genes themselves are a memory. They're a data bank. But I would say it's for me, it's easier to talk about because I've done the same thing as you did. And I think for me, doing the organized near-death experience, which I've done twice, was really about not being afraid of dying. But being afraid of dying is also being too attached to your own birth. So they are completely replicated. Navid and I have had conversations about this with your friend Navid, and I've conversated about it in the podcast, that being afraid of dying really is being too attached to being born to begin with. And so it's like there's a denied, life starts with a negation. The first thing you think when you're born is that you want to die because you want to go back in. You do not want to exist as an isolated entity. It terrifies you. But that has to be denied. And denial works. Thank God it works. There's so many things people need to deny in life just to survive. And it works. And then the mortido, the death drive, is turned into libido. And this is where you try to maintain life. And I love my libido. I love the fact that I get up every morning and I love life. I have this conversation with my 90-year-old mom these days. She's fantastic. We have conversations. She's 90. She's going to die soon, you know. And she's like, refuses to recognize you. She's so alive. So I've inherited from her this very, very strong sense of libido. But to go to that experience that you did for me, the experience was really about the experience of the near-death experience, where I literally lost control of everything, had to let go and died, and was then returned to life. And I realized that's what death is. Death is the letting go of control, and it's a release. It's fundamentally release. I can let go. And what then reincarnates is not me because it's not my actual memory. What reincarnates is the tribe itself. So I agree with your vocabulary when you say that your genes are being reborn. You get them from your parents. They're being reborn every time a new child is born. That's what reincarnates constantly. I don't know if you agree with me on the vocabulary, but that's the way I would use it.
I like that. This is something I've been going over myself quite a lot lately, the last few years. And especially I notice in the world of personal development in general, there's a lot of talks about the reincarnation and the individual reincarnation. And there's also,
tell you what, a Buddhist Zen master would tell you right off right there and say, there's nothing there to reincarnate.
Exactly.
Because your subjectivity is actually empty.
And that's what I'm feeling as well. And it's really, I feel it within myself.
The tribe, our community, our family. You're getting a daughter this summer. It's amazing. She's the reincarnation of your wife and you. Yes. So in this sense, reincarnation is the right term. I don't believe in an afterlife. I think reincarnation is the right term. But the specific memory you have, I mean, a very good lesson to do is to sit down with somebody who's getting demented and they know it. An older person getting, it's very tragic. But to go through that experience and realize how parts of them are dying because of memory loss. And actually, when you grow older, you realize the price you pay for the wisdom of having that life experience is that you remember new things less easy. So, maybe because you're actually focusing what's really important. You don't remember everything any longer like you did when you were a child. But there's something to that. I think dementia is a good point to go today, paradigmatically again, because you understand what dementia is, to understand actually that it's not about you. And when your daughter is born, the first thing that always happens is that she becomes more important to you than you are. You would die for her, right? And that's what we men are. We love that. We look for that point where somebody is more important than we are. Having a child is a perfect example of that. It could also to be on a mission together with your brothers. It could be to defend your country. You know, there's so many things men do together where they actually find a purpose, and they always return and say, I feel so satisfied. This is so the right thing for me to do because this is bigger than I am.
Yeah.
That's a committing one. And having a daughter is that. But here's the funny thing. She will then replicate the mother, not you. Probably. She might have a lesbian girl, or she might be a trans man coming, or whatever. We don't know. She probably has tons of character. We'll see eventually. But start from the default option is that the daughter usually replicates the mother. So she's comfortable being close to the mother in this sense. A son would be different. A son would then see mother as a negation and start looking to you as something he would admire. Yeah, and this is why a son wants to copy the father, whereas the daughter wants to copy the mother when they're children and they play.
There's also the Oedipus trauma, right? When the boy is 3, which is when he realizes I'm of different gender, falls in love with the mother, and then it's up to the man to help the boy to release himself from the mother by providing a lot of male love.
Yeah, male energy, being heroic.
Yeah.
That's also when the boys start opening superhero comic books.
Yeah.
They're looking for where the male ideas, like dad, but other forms of dad, and and I would say as men, our rebellion against the mother starts at 1 year of age, between 1 and 3 years of age. That's exactly right. When we go, no, I can do this myself. I can do this myself. I want to be boy because if I'm a boy, I can then be a man. And they look to the father for admiration. Yeah. He's almost divine. He's godlike. And eventually you have to tear that down too. But you have to break with the mother. And what happens is that this is called the phallic intrusion in psychoanalysis. So what the phallic intrusion means is that you do fall in love with your mother and you tell her you want to marry her when you grow up, and she has a laugh at you and she goes into the next room and fucks your dad.
Yeah.
And you don't have his penis yet. And you hate him for it.
Yeah.
That's the phallic intrusion. That means there are things in life that are impossible for you, at least now. And that's the most important lesson you ever learn. Because you're totally narcissistic. Everything's about you. You're the center of the universe. And your mother and her tit has assured that you're the center of the universe until that point. Right? So the phallic intrusion happens here between 1 year and 3 years of age. It's actually different stages. But fundamentally, it is your father has something your mother wants that you can't give your mother. And that's why she's married to him. And she won't marry you. And of course, she's nice to you. She says that, oh, but one day you're going to find a woman who's as attractive as I am, as fantastic as I am. She'll be your age, and then you can get married. But now I'm going to go and fuck your dad.
Fuck your dad.
And that's not you. No. He has something you don't have. And this, what the father has that we don't have, is exactly what kickstarts the whole journey.
Yeah.
The hero's journey, as we call the men's work. The whole journey from boy to man is kickstarted here. And then in your teenage years, you do the teenage rebellion, which is the rebellion against the phallus, against the father himself.
Exactly.
This is when you try to be him so much that you're overdoing it. You're almost like a parody of your dad. And you go up to your dad and say, you're not good enough at being you. I'm better being you than you are because I'm the perfect version of you and you're imperfect.
Yeah.
And then you go up against your dad, you try to hit him, you rebel fiercely. And then, of course, the whole thing arrives at the point you realize you're not better than your dad, you're just different.
Different.
And the difference between you and him, generational difference and difference in personality, is what you then use to get your own identity. That's when the teenage rebellion is completed. And please note here, what is very common today is that a lot of teenage boys go through the rebellion against the father but don't complete it.
Yeah.
They end up in narcissism. They end up believing everything should be given to them. They end up believing they should have everything in their lives. And actually they become incredibly unattractive to women because they're just self-obsessed. And narcissism in young men today is very often a result of an incomplete teenage rebellion. The teenage rebellion is complete not when you rebelled against the father and separated from him, but when you rebelled against the father, separated from him, and realized you are as human as he is. It's by accepting his humanity, you can accept the humanity inside of you. Then you stop being a narcissist, and then you start looking, how can I look for brothers, for other men around me who can confirm who I am, what archetype I have, and what I should do with my life? So we have a problem here with the guys between 18 and 23 years of age today. It's the biggest problem we have in men's work. They're getting lost here with narcissism.
And we're gonna move into this this topic now. I want to finish off with one more question because I felt that we didn't really fully cover the
The
I
dad
would say
thing?
no,
I love the dad thing about you.
The narcissistic, self-obsessed part of us believing that it is the individual soul that reincarnates and we are the same again. And where I talk about to many about this, they usually claim that, okay, but I saw myself as a previous person in Egypt. And it's always Egypt, by the way.
It's always Egypt, and there's always something noble.
Yeah.
It's like I said, if people had only been Ukrainian peasants, I would believe them. But they've all been some kind of Egyptian pharaoh, whatever. You know, that's New Age. That's New Age at its worst. That's New Age at its worst.
But we must still, I think, believe the experiences that people are having. How come everybody sees Egypt? What's your take on that? You know?
Oh, they want to be fancy and special.
So it's their
narcissism.
Mind projecting that
it's narcissism.
Like, I lived in Egypt.
Clearly, yes. Like I said, if they come through the door and said, I think I was Ukrainian peasant in previous life, I said, no, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just like I was
a king, I was a queen. Yeah. You know, come down from the high horses, you know, step down, be human again. And it's narcissistic like hell. And it's boring to hear those stories. No. When you experience, especially on psychedelics or in trance states, when you experience things that are so real to you, they clearly haven't happened in your life, and you try to put them somewhere, your brain will put them in another life, which is your experience. Okay? That's interesting. What's talking through you then is your geneplex. Again, go back to the difference between archetype and paradigm. The archetype is the geneplex. You are born with billions of neurons, and they're structured systematically. Then it's also added hormones to that, on top of that, meaning you become a man. As a man, you are the son of all the men, thousands of men in previous generations from your lineage. This is lineage. That means that not the memory of what they've gone through, but the archetypes they've been. So, for example, I'm a monk. I'm not a father. I'm one of the 10 men who's supposed to be monk instead of being a father. I became an abbot. I'm now 63 years old, and I love my younger monks. So I'm a father anyway. We all become parents. Everyone has becomes a parent, but the different times of parentage. They can also be a matriarch or a patriarch. You know, you can be parent to grown-ups in a way as well. So I became that abbot. I knew when I was a child, I was 8 years old, I knew I'd be a monk. I lived in all kinds of monasteries in my teenage years already. I pursued that, which means I love and respect the men who should be fathers even more because they're not me. So then I started looking at my family. I became a philosopher eventually. And it turns out that the one thing I love to do philosophy about is engineering. Okay? What do you think my lineage looks like in my family?
A lot of engineers.
They build shit.
Yeah.
My dad built shit. My granddad built shit. My brothers build shit. They build shit like that. I just build ideas. So I became the monk version of the archetype that builds shit. What I instead do is I build ideas. And the first thing I build is the idea that as a man who builds ideas, I admire men who build shit. That's what reincarnation is.
Yeah.
And I can then, of course, when I go into trance states or psychedelics, I can, of course, see myself subtly as the guy who builds a fucking skyscraper.
Yeah.
But it's not me.
Oh.
But there's so many men in my lineage who've dreamed about building such buildings.
Yeah.
And instead, I'm interested in architecture, and I write theory for architects.
Oh, that's amazing.
Do you see how I use what's reincarnated in me?
Yeah.
By going to my geneplex. And the other part I use the memeplex. The memeplex is language, it's words, it's what you experienced during your specific life. So the memeplex reflects the specific time period you live in. So, for example, I live in a 21st century society. AI has just arrived. It's going to change everything forever. We have the internet age. We're all sitting with laptops and smartphones in the room that did not exist 30 years ago. All of these things are specific for the times we live in. That's the memeplex. And as a man, you are a memeplex and you are a geneplex. So when you talk about reincarnation, you talk about things that you explore in your geneplex. But when you talk about the memeplex instead, you see something else. For example, when you do archetypology as well, some people come to me, like you, and they've had experience of being a woman.
Yeah.
Okay? Because half of them come from the female tree, right? And then, of course, the way you interpret that is that in a previous life, you were a woman, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, oh, that's an interesting story. Funny, though, but you just mentioned about 4 different things that could not have happened at the same time historically. So it's obviously just your fantasy. But what's interesting here is that your anima is speaking through you.
Yeah.
The woman inside you as a man is speaking through you. use it. It's creatively fascinating, but the NEMA more than anything is there. This was Jung was right. The NEMA more than anything is there for you to understand women as much as possible so you can communicate with and live with women. The woman inside of you as a man is the NEMA. And this is why very often in these reincarnation fantasies, people return to ideas that they've been a woman somewhere. And my point in taking down the fantasies to make people see it's a fantasy, but the fantasy reveals something much deeper than actually something that happened to you in a previous life. Rather, other people lived those previous lives. You've inherited their genes.
Exactly.
And exactly the archetypes they were at different time periods, including the women in your family, which is like half your family tree. This is what they try to communicate through you. You probably see that anima probably runs pretty well with the woman you just decided to raise a family with.
Yeah.
Yes. There you go. Then it makes sense if you have those fantasies, psychedelic or a trance experience, because if you met a certain woman, you know this is the one. And she sees me as the one. We're meant for each other. We should raise a family together. Then you want to understand her better. You don't want her to be the damn mystery that women constantly are. You want to keep the mystery for sexual attraction.
Yeah.
But you don't want her to be a mystery in the social life, right? And to get to that, your anima is there. It's very often an older woman, actually, for most men. So it's not sexualized.
Got it.
Yeah. And women have the same animas.
Yeah.
They go through the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think when they come through the door and say they were an Egyptian pharaoh, I said, oh, that was original.
Exactly.
I think anybody from Shirley MacLaine forward has claimed that, you know, that's not interesting at all. Actually, you're not an Egyptian pharaoh right now.
No, definitely not.
so I don't care.
Exactly.
I care who you are. You know? I don't care about what you fantasize about. That's my work.
Brilliant. Thank you for going down there with me on this one. I think this is very important for people to learn and know and to mature into. And I think deep down is also, again, this deep-seated fear of death that is causing us to create all of these, like this overemphasis on the individuality of ourselves. And it's
it's a trap.
Yeah.
Narcissism is hell, because narcissism, the constant preoccupation with yourself, is a result of the society we live in. And that's why it's exploding currently. And it's very inhumane. Narcissism is a compensation behavior. It starts from a void that you try to fill. And it's fundamentally a misunderstanding of self-love. We wrote a book called Synthism, Creating God in the Internet Age. And in chapter 8 of the Synthism book, one of the most profound texts Jan and I wrote, it's about self-love. Self-love is just an act. It's a decision. It's not a feeling. When people say, I don't feel I can love myself, I said, you can't even see yourself. You are your own blind spot. Yeah. You're completely dependent on other human beings to see you. You cannot see yourself because you're actually using the same tool that is you to try to see yourself, which is impossible. It's very nice to actually discover you cannot see yourself. So you cannot love yourself emotionally, but you're trapped. You cannot be anybody else but who you are. So you must love yourself. It's conditional. And that's how you start getting rid of the problem. The way I describe it for men is quite brutal. I'll give you the example.
Please.
I get up in the morning, I undress and go naked. I stand in front of the mirror and I look what an ugly, fucking, shitty, dirty old pervert is standing in front of the mirror. And then I realize that women out there are attracted to this nonsense. I realize they're perverts and I love them for it and I go out and get them. The point being, I don't have to have an opinion about myself. Oh God, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I can't hear my own voice. Nobody can. I can't see myself. That's the weak point. But it's great because we all know everybody has that blind spot. We cannot see or hear ourselves. So we are completely dependent for others to see and hear us. Sometimes we can't even get enough of it because we still can't figure out what they see or hear. No. So it's like a mystery, but stay with that. This is how you get out of narcissism, by accepting yourself. So if somebody asks yourself, do you feel that you love yourself? Oh God, I can't afford to feel anything about that. I just love myself, period. I just walk out in the world and say, I love myself. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And then I can feel about others. I can feel about other people because I can actually avoid them or I can be more with them or whatever. I can choose my relations with other people. I can't choose my relationship with myself.
No, we can't.
No. So The word we were looking for is the opposite of narcissism, which is often mistaken for narcissism, which is actually a beautiful word. And that word is exhibitionism.
Mm.
The exhibitionist is the man who knows himself, loves himself, unconditionally accepted who he is, and has discovered he has a fantastic gift, his primary archetype.
Yeah.
And when he swings his primary archetype around, the other guys go, wow. And the girls go, ooh, I want him. Right?
Yeah.
But the point is that he's not doing it from a starting point, which is a void. He's doing it from a point called abundance. He has too much of it.
Yeah.
He'd love to share it. And when you walk up on a stage, my entire career has been on stages. I'm actually an introvert, bizarrely enough. My career has been on stages. It's been giving speeches, and before that I was a rock star. So I've been on stages quite a lot. And I can tell you what, when the narcissist walks up on the stage, people hate him for it. Because he will stay on the stage for as long as he can. He can't get enough of the applause. He can't get enough of the flowers afterwards. He can't get enough of the champagne. But he's a bit irritating because he won't get off the stage when actually we're getting bored with him.
Yeah.
That's the narcissist.
It speaks slightly too long.
Yeah, I always tell narcissists to go and make careers in musical theater, because then they have to make auditions all the time. And then they're just going to play a role anyway. So it's not about them. You know, do musical theater, whatever. But don't try to become a rock star, because they would hate you for it, and never give a speech. The exhibitionist reluctantly goes on the stage, is a bit bored. He's just going to do his job. So he walks up on the stage and says, okay, you put me here for 45 minutes, you pay me for it. Okay, I'll give you a show. Off he goes. And he does wonderfully what he's supposed to do for the next 45 minutes. And as soon as he's finished, he said, I'm finished. I'm out of here. I'm going to send you an invoice. I will never ever see you again. By the way, I'm going to go and have a rape shower, backstage. And then I'm off to somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's the exhibitionist. He just gives generously from an abundance.
Yeah.
And if you ask women what they dream about getting from man, they would use the word abundance. He should come back from the hunt and come back from the war with an abundance. An abundance of food, an abundance of protection.
Yeah.
The word the women look for in men is abundance, just like we look for the word generosity from women. The problem I have with Swedish women today is that they're not being generous to the men. And immigrant men who arrived in Sweden said about Swedish women, yeah, they're blonde and they're beautiful, but they're not generous. A woman should be generous. It's not a woman unless she's generous to me as men. And the lack of generosity from women and the lack of abundance from men, it proves that we've gone wrong. When men go back to the mode of producing an abundance to women, and women go back to producing generosity towards men, they're going to nail it. It's going to work. I'm sure you're a perfect example, obviously, because you and your wife love each other and you're going to have a baby this summer. And I mean, if you look at it, it's your abundance that you give to her and her generosity given back to you that makes the whole thing stick together, right? So this abundance that we have to find again. And here is why it's important for me to stress the difference between the narcissist and the exhibitionist. The narcissist steals energy from you.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't believe in himself. He's trying to fill a void and try to compensate for his lack of self-love by making other people love him. But since he cannot believe that they love him, he's nothing to receive the self-love with, then he will just endlessly go on to try to find that attention all the time. Whereas the man who's confident, found himself, accepted himself, can abundantly give. He can give to men, he can give to women, and that's what you want to be as a man. You want to be this man of abundance, and he's the exhibitionist. And the voyeurs are the ones who just enjoy seeing you on the stage. You know, a lot of guys, I just tell them, go to a football match.
Yeah.
Take your friends when you go to a football match. You're in the audience. You're voyeurs. You're thousands of you. And 11 guys down there are your team, and they're going to beat the shit out of the other team and kill them.
Yeah.
It's an arranged warfare where thankfully you're not going to kill each other. It's called a sport. But the team sport, by the 11 men collaborating and seeing the collaboration as something beautiful, they give their abundance to you. The football players give their abundance to you because they're exhibitionists. You as a voyeur accept their abundance.
So, and so in essence, for everyone, I love this because, I mean, first when hearing about this, one could say that, okay, not everybody's going to be an exhibitionist, but what you're saying is really become an exhibitionist and just through your archetype.
Yeah, and here's the point is that we both loaded narcissist and exhibitionist with negative connotations.
Yeah, completely.
We should immediately remove exhibitionism and use that word. It's the only word we have. We're abundantly giving to other people of what you have.
What I love and what I have.
And I just have too much of it.
Yeah.
And it's the easiest thing in the world for me. That's what really blows our minds. It's like, what? Is that the easiest thing in the world for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like nothing. What? It's like the weirdest thing ever. I'm so fucking impressed. I can't believe you're saying this is the easiest thing in the world. But that's where the exhibitionist just laughs back and said, yeah, I can't explain it. It's just the easiest thing in the world for me to do.
It just feels more like play than work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Primary archetype. Exhibitionism.
Oh, I love this.
And exhibitionism, voyeurism are fantastic. Just like in my work, also dominance and submission are fantastic terms.
Yeah.
Dominant submission, it's where you dance a tango. You lead, she follows.
Yeah.
She's not under you. It's an equal relationship.
Exactly.
It's just dominance and submission means that somebody takes the lead and walks out of the room and takes leadership.
Exactly.
And you submit to that dominance because your role, your archetype is going to be within a container that is led by this leader. There's nothing wrong with hierarchy either. I mean, think about it. It's absolutely necessary.
Oh, yeah.
So we use these words in a negative connotation. But when you go into tantric work, for example, you discover that masculine, feminine, dominant, submissive, exhibitionism, voyeurism are equal terms.
Yeah.
None of them is loaded with any value at all.
No.
No, rather the exhibitionism, voyeurism relationship was the value. The dominant submission relationship has the value. The masculine, feminine relationship has the value. It's called marriage. That's where the value lies, in the relations.
Wow. This is wow, yeah. I'm really impressed by this conversation, and I feel I'm learning a lot from it. So thank you. I know that many listeners will learn a lot from this as well. I want to segue now to another topic, which I know is highly topical right now, which is an article you just wrote. And this article stems from basically it is an article talking about Swedish television's show Agenda, where they were basically talking about the reasons why young men and women are now more polarized than ever in regards to how they vote. And the article is called From Class Struggle to Gender War, a historical low point for SVT.
Yeah, so we should discuss what's specific to Sweden. Sweden is ahead of the curve here. I think it's important to stress. We're seeing similar movements in Europe and in North America, but I would say Sweden is ahead of the curve here. The argument in the article, I wrote it with three other brothers, Mosa, Victor, and Jonathan. They're great brothers. We work a lot together in the men's movement. And we saw this TV show that upset a lot of women too, we should say. It was a TV show a few weeks ago where basically the show was based on the axiom that left is better than right, women are better than men, and middle class is better than working class.
Yeah.
And then they just pulled that axiom through the entire show without even discussing the problems with it. It was a false axiom, obviously, and disgraceful. What we're saying in the article is that feminism, and with feminism also LGBT struggle, were basically finished in our part of the world in the 1980s. It had achieved the equality it asked for. The problem was that, especially feminism, had a lot of careerists by then. People who made careers out of being feminists. They went into politics, they went into the bureaucracy, they went into government institutions and academics, and were doing, gender studies and made careers out of them. And of course, if you made a career out of something that suddenly becomes redundant because you've actually succeeded, you're historically going to try to invent new problems that don't exist.
Exactly.
And what happens in the 1990s in Sweden is that when LGBT people have succeeded, instead of looking at the rest of the world, where basically LGBT people are deeply discriminated against in places like Russia, Iran, Uganda today, there's lots of problems out there in the world. Instead of looking towards an international discourse, they invented the letter Q and added it to LGBT and invented problems that did not exist. I was critical about this 25 years ago, 1998. I wrote a piece. I'm technically bisexual, so I'm part of the LGBT movement. So I wrote this article that said, I'm leaving, I'm getting out, because Q has nothing to do with the political struggle of LGBT people. Q is just the addition by bureaucrats of a problem that does not exist, which is added to it. It means you're going to go after heterosexual people for the choices they made. I will not be part of that. I totally recognize heterosexual people for being the vast majority of people and being perfectly fine, being our fathers and our mothers and breeding and having families and everything. And I am disgusted with the idea that we should find them problematic compared to LGBT. I'm not part of this. I'm leaving. The feminists did the same mistake in the 1990s. Petra Östergren was a feminist here in Sweden who wrote a fantastic piece early 1990s when she came out, a Swedish leading feminist, and left the feminist movement and said, if you're going to move from respecting men as equals towards hating men, I'm out.
Yeah.
And radical feminism started hating men in the 1990s in Sweden. We have a unique Swedish legislation in the sense that we took the term violence in close relationships and turned that legal term into men's violence against women.
As a general gender neutral norm.
Well, you moved from gender neutral, which is fine. You killed the gender neutral and went towards a man-hating vocabulary.
Exactly. Now, and using that as the neutral norm. Right?
So we should say this. Today in Sweden in 2024, in a close relationship, if the woman beats the man, it's technically speaking seen as men's violence against women.
Because there are no other term for it.
It's like the woman has become the man temporarily, but still his fault. It's absurd. But these are the legal consequences of legislation we've had in Sweden since the 1990s that are unique to Sweden. This is perverted. It's just horrible. So radical feminism took off in a whole new direction in the 1990s, and this is completed now. And what essentially happened was that the left was originally working class people who read Karl Marx and fought for their own rights, right? In the 1980s, the left was taken over by the academic middle class. And they openly hated the working class for not causing the revolution they were supposed to create. Because working class people basically just wanted to go to work and get paid well, and that was it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the middle class people fancied the revolution was this romantic thing they were obsessed with, and they came from academics. There were a lot more women than men. And they came in the 1980s and said, okay, but let's skip this class struggle entirely. Let's stop reading Karl Marx. And instead they invented woke.
Yeah.
And what they invented with woke culture was that, oh, there are so many grievances out there. There's so many oppressed people. There are all different kinds of groups of oppressed people out there. So we're not going to have a fight over who's the most oppressed. So all the oppressed people will fight against each other over who the most oppressed. But to unite them in one struggle, we have to have a common enemy. That common enemy became the white heterosexual man.
Yeah.
Maybe originally it was the white heterosexual upper class man, but today it's definitely the white heterosexual working class man. In Sweden, it's called the Sweden Democrat. And he's like now 20% of the population, meaning he's half of all men. So these radical feminists hate these men, and they hate them for betraying the class struggle, but they betrayed the class struggle to begin with and turned it into a gender war. And then they're basically accusing them of being men, and because they're men, they're guilty. Now, what I saw over the last 10 years is that we got an explosion in Sweden of men who are convicted for sex offenses. So it's sexual crime.
Yeah.
It's called rape, and just about anything is called rape these days in Sweden. Just looking at a girl and apparently you raped her. Actually ignoring a girl and saying no, it's raping her these days as well. So what happened after 2014 was that there was such a political desire driven by the radical feminists that we must sentence more men for rape, even if they haven't raped. We don't care because they're men, so they're guilty because they're men. So guilt lies in you as a man because you're a man. That's a radical feminist dogma because it's called the patriarchy. It's some kind of a ghost. They're chasing this ghost called patriarchy all the time. So they go after all men, and if occasionally innocent men are sentenced to rape because it's just the woman's story in the courtroom is the only evidence you need in Sweden. Literally, if the woman's story is opposed to the man's story, the judges have to follow the woman's story and judge according to her story.
When was this legislated? Or is this
It was done in 2009. But it was technically validified in 2014. And after 2014, the number of cases of men getting sentenced for rape in Sweden has gone into the hundreds every year.
Okay, so
after Me Too, and after the new ridiculous law about sexual consent in 2018, it's exploded. It's now thousands of men every year who get sentenced for rape in Sweden are obviously completely innocent.
So what it takes is really anyone can then sue me for rape.
Any girl can say that you have raped her.
Yeah.
And if she says that, you will be sentenced to prison for rape. Yes.
But that's, I had no, how?
Those people don't know.
No.
No. I've seen this explosion over the last 2 years. I took the fight against Me Too because I knew Me Too would make it even worse. And what's really bad about Me Too in Sweden was that all the men who were accused in the Me Too purges in Sweden were innocent. Every one of them was innocent. It was horrible. And basically Me Too died because of it, because finally some men started committing suicide, and then all the fun was over and the whole thing stopped. But it was a lynch mob. And this lynch mob is women at their very worst. Radical feminists today. This is women at the very worst. This is women who are not generous at all. This is women who hate men. And what they're doing is that they're going after men, and they're very satisfied that so many men get sentenced to rape and thrown into prison. When you ask them, well, you know, there's a lot of men here obviously innocent, or at least there's no evidence of them having done anything. Actually, the evidence is on their side of things, and they still get sentenced for rape. And the women just go, well, the occasional innocent man has to go in there because it's the patriarchy, and the patriarchy has to be punished. And all men are guilty of being part of the patriarchy.
Yeah. But okay, so, but there can't be 100, like, because what it sounds to me is that right now 100% of cases end up with the man being convicted. Or
yes,
are there
about a third are real rapists that we would kill?
But there must be cases where they end up not convicted.
What we've done is we've been very smart. We started in a network called Mannaminne. We're launching Mannaminne big time this year. We've connected hundreds of these men with each other. We read all the court cases. And what we discovered was that about a third of all the men are clearly rapists. Here's the obvious case.
Yeah.
They even admit, right? We would strangle them if we had them in the room.
Yeah.
The way we men hate a man
exactly.
who rapes a woman, right? About a second third are the men who had sex with the woman in question. It was sloppy. It wasn't the best night. It wasn't the best relationship. It could have been drunk and drugs and shit involved, whatever. It wasn't the best sex ever, but it was not a rape. We call that category sloppy sex. And then the last and third category are completely framed. These are the guys who turned down the girl, and she realizes she can cause a revenge on him by claiming that he raped her. This is the marriage gone wrong where there's a divorce. And suddenly the divorcee, the woman who's divorcing, is revengeful against her husband and realizes she can both get paid and have the child to herself and solve all her problems by accusing rape and having him sentenced to rape. So she just says that the last time we fucked each other before we got divorced, he raped me. Wow. And he doesn't stand a chance. And she gets everything. She gets the child, she gets the money, she gets everything, and his life is ruined and he ends up in prison. And you know, when women are out for the revenge, they are very revengeful. Let's put it that way. So what we have is that we basically let the guys who are sentenced read each other's court documents. No guy can be a better filter for you than the guy who's sentenced to the same crime as you are.
Yeah.
And instantly, even inside prison, you have these groupings. The guys who are completely innocent and have been framed to find each other. The sloppy sex guys fight each other and try to get into the group with the framed guys. And the rapists are left to themselves. They're left to themselves. So we see this pattern already inside the prisons. So what we're doing now, we're organizing a network. We're teaching the guys that you're not strong on your own. You got to find your brothers who are in the same position as you are. And actually, over the last month, what has really surprised me is how many women are joining this struggle. Mothers, of course, of innocently sentenced men.
Yeah.
Women who realize this is women at their worst. I don't want to be part of this. A lot of liberal women, women coming from the right, conservative women are joining. Just a lot of women who are very, very upset with radical feminism. This is degrading for us as women.
Yeah.
If it's a court of law, then we must have evidence that this has happened. Otherwise, we cannot sentence anybody to anything. And this is exactly what protects women in the long run, is the fact that we have courts of law. If you have lynch mobs in the streets, eventually women are going to be sacrificed because of it. And these women are also joining this Mannaminne and this network because they realize that if this goes on, men will start hating us back and go violent. Because when men in the men's movement are realizing there are hundreds of men out there, brothers, they could have been you, being sentenced and thrown into prison for years. They're in prison for years and have their lives destroyed. And they're clearly innocent. These guys get so upset they don't know what to do. And so why do you think the men's movement is so important?
Exactly.
And this is what we're up against. But thankfully, what we did last year, which was very clever, we separated the men's movement, which is only men, and a few trans men. And we separate that and created Man a Minute because we thought maybe women actually want to join us eventually further down the line. And now the women are jumping on board and they're the best collaborators, the best activists of them all. The women who decide to go into this network are on fire. They're just like, we want equality. We want gender neutrality. We want any more of this bullshit. We don't want the men's violence against women terminology any longer. If somebody beats somebody else's relationship, it's absolutely gender neutral. Whoever beats the other person is the one who gets sentenced for a crime. Nothing else. Yeah. So we can have proper gender neutral legislation in Sweden. So this is the goal. And this is the goal, to clean up the Swedish courts and get these cases out of there and finally start giving the proper rapists their due term in prison. But actually all the other guys, when we can't prove anything, we must let them go.
Wow, this is the first time I'm hearing about this, and also, I mean,
it's building underground.
Yeah, like what's actually happening in this network? Like, what's the operation? Like, what do you do there? Like, how can everybody join? Or
you can join if you're upset about the current situation. You want to be an activist and participate. Yeah. You can contact me. I'm available. You can contact me through Fabian if nothing else. So you know, you have access to me if you're interested. Both men and women are joining. Very often they have a friend who got sentenced.
Yeah.
And it was innocent, clearly innocent. Sometimes they knew the couple and knew that she was upset and used the mechanisms of law today to actually revenge him.
Got it.
Very often it's the girlfriend that says, I'm never going to see this girl ever again. I don't want to be the kind of woman that she is. I don't want to do this to a man ever. I want to join Man a Minute. There are mothers, there are fathers, there are parents. But the personal journey is often one, and this goes for myself as well. One of my closest brothers got sentenced to 3.5 years in jail. It was absolutely, totally innocent. And we took it to the second highest level in Sweden, which is hovrätten.
Yeah.
And we had 3 male doctors giving, justifying his story and saying that the girl's story in this case was absolutely incoherent, could not be used. And still the female judges, 3 of them, gave him an even harsher penalty because he didn't show enough respect towards the girl's emotions. So that means a woman is sitting in front of you in court. She's lying in your face. And you get sentenced for not showing respect for her emotionality? You know, this is so bad. This is so hard. And this is a real gender war. And I never wanted our culture to go towards gender war. I see all the Western culture going towards gender warfare. And we cannot afford to have a warfare between the sexes.
No.
We cannot. This has to be over and done with quickly. No culture is ever experimenting with treating their young men like this, like we're doing in Sweden right now. What makes me so upset is that no culture had ever imagined to treat its young men the way we do in Sweden today. I've seen women coming straight from psychiatric care units, clearly borderline nutcases, giving witness in court about 5 men having raped them. And suddenly just the persecutor picking one of them and having thrown into jail. When clearly the whole thing is made up. I've seen these cases again and again and again, hundreds of them by now. And lawyers are upset, the people inside the legal system are upset too, but they're asking us who are outside the legal system to take the political activism because they can't. If you react against the current system as a person within the legal system, you're basically banned forever. That's how much they protect each other within the system itself. So this has to be political struggle to change politics, and then through politics change the legal system.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like this is great and so important. And
You know what we do? We have an absolute zero tolerance policy within Man a Minute for discrediting women.
Yeah.
You cannot attack women. If you come in through the door and your man hates women, you're just like the people we're going to go against. Then out you go. We do not tolerate narcissism. Of course, when the guys come through the door, they think they're unique. They think what happened to them is like a total nightmare. Then they realize inside the network, there are hundreds of men exactly like them. They're not even the worst case. And the third one is they must learn to collaborate. And when they collaborate, they must be heroic. We do not tolerate victimhood cults. We're not a victimhood cult at all. These men are treated like shit, but we don't accept the victimhood mark at all.
No.
They're heroic.
Yeah.
We stay with the heroic because it's the only way to win a struggle like this.
Yeah. I mean, how, like, as we're moving towards the end of this conversation, which is amazing, by the way, I'd like to really to talk constructively about like how and perhaps, I mean, right now, if you look at the world and the state of the world, there's a lot of polarity everywhere. There's a lot of conflicts. There's and I mean specifically between race, between religions, between gender, and one can definitely go into the long conversation about you know, who's the real oppressor? Is it someone else causing us to end up in this chaotic situation in the state of the world? No matter who it is or what it is, or whether it's just the chaos of life which is causing us to end up where we are, what is the way forward? Like,
well, I've got some good news for you.
Yeah.
Good news for men. Men are lucky. We are actually historically moving towards digital patriarchy. So if patriarchy never existed, well, obviously patriarchy exists in places like Afghanistan. When women are being locked up and can't even go down the street without having a burqa over them, so this is a patriarchy. But a patriarchy gone wrong, I would say. But we're moving towards digital patriarchy because technology is moving in a direction where men are actually winning. The engineers of the world are in for a good time. And here's also the good news about a lot of men who are getting married, finding the right wife, realizing what a challenge they got ahead of them, but they're really devoted to it. And we see them in the men's movement everywhere. Some of the guys in your team, like Joel and Carl, have been involved as well in the men's movement. And it's fantastic to see these strong men coming through the door and say, yeah, but we fixed ourselves. We're on the right path. We will deliver. Women love us, right? And the trick is actually that AI coming is going to be good news for men, but tough news for women. It's going to kill a lot of women's jobs. It's kind of a weird twist, isn't it? But it's actually just, I mean, it's nobody's in control of this development. Technology has its own path. Technological evolution does what it does.
Yeah.
All we can do as human beings is to adapt to the technological environment we're in. We're adapting to the information technology. People tell me that, well, I want to get off my smartphone addiction because it's so damn hard to get off the smartphone addiction. And I asked them, so what do you do about it? Well, I got an app.
Yeah,
exactly. Addiction. I mean, oh God, the smartphone is it's the devil's tool. I mean, it's the only way to get off the addiction from it is to use it even more.
Yeah, exactly.
This is technology. I love technology. You know, I told you about my reincarnation, my family background. Everybody's a fucking constructor, my entire family, except for me, because I just build ideas. And I love my dad, I love my brother for it, but that's my family background. But I would say, for sure, over the next 10 to 20 years, we'll see the development definitely going towards the direction that men are in demand more than ever. Even if programming coding is done automatically by AI to a large extent, the complexity of larger chunks of programming coding will still be done by men. Yeah. It's more like you work with bricks rather than you work with little points. But I see a lot of problems actually with women's careers. Women are going into old careers. Women are going into law. They're going into medicine. And these careers will be very much hurt by AI because AI will take over a lot of the jobs that women are doing today. Yeah. And when women come to me and realize this, because I've talked about it previously in podcasts, it's going to be a tough time for women professionals in the next 20 years. And they go, okay, as a woman, what would be a smart thing to do? And I said, get an education as a nurse with the possibility to become a doctor. There's a shortage of 14 million nurses today in North America and Europe. And there'd be more old men with tons of money around than ever need somebody to wipe their ass off when they're old and demented. So become a nurse, just to be on the safe side, right? If you're a man, become an engineer. No. If you have enough of mathematics skills and talent for it, study to become an engineer. You'll be totally fine. The demand for engineers is just relentless. Yeah. So for any man out there who wants a good advice, if you have the capacity to become an engineer, it's a really good archetype to pursue, and you will have a career and you will do fine and you will be perfect marriage material for women. I can guarantee that. So the good side is actually that a lot of people are already on the good side, are already going to be successful, are going to enjoy the fruits of AI and everything that's happening at the moment. What we're talking about here in this conversation is, of course, the brothers out there who really need us right now. Yeah. Because they're lost. Exactly. So if we, like you are, Fabian, if you're on the right side of things, the next thing you look for when it comes to purpose and meaning is, where are my brothers?
Exactly.
And this is why I've always said when I started doing men's work 10 years ago, the men's movement is nothing unless we're also finding our brothers when they are in the psychiatric care unit. Unless we're there as well, we're not a men's movement. But we must hold them responsible for taking care of themselves. There must be this desire to grow up and become an adult.
Exactly.
It starts there.
So how do we have, like, to bring it back to the article, the men who are now leaning more and more towards right, and sometimes, I guess, easier to fall into the like being influenced by sometimes extremist ideologies or viewpoints. How do we help those men?
We have conversations with them.
We have conversations.
There's a popular philosopher out there, a Romanian guy called Costin Alamario. He's also called the Bronze Age pervert. A lot of young men are reading him. And then they come to me and ask for my opinion. I said, well, he's a fascist. He's a great fascist. He's good at fascism. Read it.
Yeah.
Learn how the fascist mind works. Look at what he denies to get to its core, which is the fascism part. And I want that conversation. I want the conversation with all men out there. I want the openness. I want the freedom to have free conversations, to discuss everything and turn every stone.
Yeah.
Personally, I think we're going to end up with a debating climate where it's going to be conservative or liberal. Liberal in the classical sense, like classical liberal, more freedom, more decentralization, or bigger government, more control.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will go towards the surveillance state, the police state, and they will love it.
And when you say liberal, are we thinking like the...
Not American, not Hillary Clinton's. I mean, classically liberal.
Or like
I call myself a liberal nationalist.
Yeah.
I believe the nation is a fantastic institution, needs to be protected, needs to work, because it's the largest format we invented that makes sense to people. The people who speak the same language can have a shared unity. And you cannot be a liberal unless there is a nation first that works, because otherwise you're talking about anarchy. But as a liberal nationalist, I want the borders to work. I want the nation to work. I want it to be respected. I want to defend it. But I want the government to be small, and I want a lot of power to be given to the citizens so they can decide for themselves what they want.
It's a bit like objectivism, Ayn Rand.
No.
Libertarianism.
Not objectivism. I'm not a Randian at all. No, I'd rather think of it like, I think the big struggle is, are we going to have large governments that have access to all the information about us in the future?
Yeah.
With big tech companies collaborating with governments to control us? Because the Chinese are certainly going that path.
Yeah.
In America and in Europe, we can still choose to go towards more freedom and openness, but then we also have to have restrictions on what technology can do, so that we can stay free and make our own decisions about our own lives. And I've always believed in human freedom. I always believed in citizenship. I always believed that the vast majority of men and women are perfectly capable of being adults and raising families and having kids and everything. So I think the vast majority of people are perfectly fine with that. I think big government actually is problematic. And Sweden is a perfect example of that today. The government here is way too big. And too many people are employed by it instead of giving more people to the citizens themselves. So I want to move towards what I call liberal nationalism, but I'm perfectly happy to have conversations, for example, with national conservatives, which a lot of these guys are today, the men who go towards the right, the national conservatives. And let's have those debates.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then make decisions together.
Yeah. Bring back debate, please. Wow. Alexander, I have so much respect for you and this conversation that we've had. I've learned a lot, and I have many things to process myself after. I loved our conversation about archetypology and going deeper, especially finding your primary and your secondary. There, I am personally going to go, dive deeper. I mean, I can sense already from the conversation, but just getting clear with that.
And if you're listening to this conversation out there, there's Jan Söderqvist in Sweden, and Joel and Carl here in your studio are involved as well. You can just contact us and we introduce you. We have a simple mailing list as the format we're working with. And there's also an international network as well. I'm working with the men's movement in all of Europe, in the UK, Germany, Holland, other countries too. And we learn from each other. And whoever comes up with an idea that works, a best practice, can be copied by everybody else.
Beautiful.
It's fantastic to be part of it.
I'm also part of Söderqvist, and I can highly recommend for if you're a Swede to join the mailing list, get involved. There's a ton of engagement, discussions, debates, all of it.
And it's good for you to be in environments without women.
Exactly.
Just like it's really good for women to occasionally be in environments where they don't have to have men around them.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
I want to really thank you, Alexander, for coming. I feel like we should be talking many more times in the future. I would love to have you back as a guest, but for now, thank you once again. And yeah, onwards you go in your life.
Thanks for having me.